Hello everybody, it's your non-binary pal E.V.A here, and welcome to a very big speed paint video because this is going to be a collection of all the artworks I've made of Lai over the past couple months. Lai is one of my characters, one of my OCs. You can watch some of the videos about him to understand him as he is now, because I have recently redesigned him quite a lot and overhauled his story a bit. So this is going to be the last video of his old design and me making art with this old design before I introduce his newest design in the next video. And also, before this video begins, I just wanted to give an announcement. I will be changing my uploading schedule to every other week rather than every week. The every week thing was kind of getting a lot on me, especially with my school and stuff. So yeah, just going to be doing every other week from now on. I might still try to post maybe like something on the Sundays where I don't post a video. Let me know what you would like to see. But with that, let's go ahead and get started with the first artwork. These first artworks are angel and demon themed, and this first one is based off of very retro style screen, you know, the ones you see in the 90s and aughts. And yeah, I wanted to draw something with a more complex pose and this cool retro screen background. So I drew this thumbnail not realizing how much the pose would be very challenging for me, but that's okay. Doing a challenging pose like this is good every now and then. So I kept adjusting the pose until I got it right. And yeah, once I did, I think I even had a little bit of trouble in the line art phase. Of course, that's just what always happens when I'm drawing a pose that's a little more complex to draw. The whole process tends to be challenging up until the coloring. Once I did that, though, the outfit was also hard to draw. I think I was just having a hard time deciding what I wanted it to be. Probably should have done some sketching beforehand to figure that out, but that's all right. And I had to redraw the majority of the hatching shading that I usually do because I think I drew it in the wrong light source. I wanted the light source to be one way, but I drew the hatching shading in another way. Whoops. Since this artwork, I've also been adjusting my art style quite a bit as well. I've talked about it a little bit before, but I've even changed it quite a bit since the video where I drew Zach and Chris. And yeah, you'll see that in the next upcoming video. And yeah, you'll see how I've changed my style up a bit as far as drawing, as far as like rendering. My style itself hasn't changed that much, although I have gotten to drawing more detailed faces as of late. But other than that, it's just the progression of how I do things that has changed a bit. I experimented with the background quite a bit. I wanted to make sure all the lines were straight, so I used some ruler tools and stuff, and I tried to add in all the cool like item menu things as best as I could. And yeah, because this drawing overall was pretty light, I rendered Lai with a lot of light colors, which can be a bit challenging, not making it look super washed out, especially with this design. His skin is pretty pale, but yeah, I got that done, and not much foreground needed since the background was pretty complex. It gave enough detail that I felt like I didn't need to add too much of a foreground. And yeah, that was it for this drawing. And then the next one was Demon Lai. I wanted to stick to the retro theming, but with more of a neon punk vibe instead. The way I was going to do this, I was debating if I wanted it to be in my scratch art style or not, which is me replicating that style of where you draw on black paper, the type of black paper where you scratch away with a needle and then show the colors underneath. But I decided not to do that. I did the liner a bit scratchier just in case I wanted to do that, but instead I did not do that. But yeah, this one ended up being a lot more darker and more vibrant because of that neon punk aesthetic. And the outfit as well is much more punk, giving a lot more classic demon vibes here. And I actually ended up using the exact same window screen from the other one. I tried experimenting with the colors here in the window. In the last one, I drew just sort of like a nice calm sky scenery scene, and this one I wanted to draw more with like lights, cool lights and stuff, like cool flowing lights, almost like those cool like 90s screensaver things. I think you know the one I'm talking about, where the lines just kind of moved all over the place, inspired by that. And because the colors were a lot more darker and vibrant, I was able to use much more vibrant colors for rendering, which I am much more comfortable using. I love a good vibrant color palette. But yeah, and I did some color adjusting towards the end to make the contrast a little more obvious. And that was also it for this one. The next one is a whole series of drawings I did for an art style challenge. Now, typically with art style challenges, you draw different styles in different shows or medias or even other artists' styles. But for some reason, I didn't feel like doing that. So instead, I decided to draw in different styles of sort of my own sort of styles. I did a cartoon style, like my style, but even more cartoony. A traditional artwork, a pixel style, a lineless style, things like that. So yeah, I drew Lai for all of those, and I drew him as different, and I gave him a different design for each one, being fruit themed, because I like to draw Lai in different fruit themed outfits and with different fruit flavored, I guess, hair and eyes when I'm drawing him in my sketchbook. So yeah, a bit of an homage to that. So the first one was a cherry. The first one, I gave him a cherry-based design, and I drew him in a more cartoony style. It's very similar to mine, but it's like even more cartoony, like sharp and stuff. Very much based on like styles that I like to see. And even my style has actually been like kind of going away from this more stylized cartoony and even more into like the semi-realistic sort of, but still stylized lately. But yeah, this was fun to draw. Shading was super easy, just stuck to some cell shading, and drawing with just the G pen for the line art was a fun challenge. Don't typically do that because I love a good crunchy pixelated line art brush when I do my line art. Next one was pixel art, and I drew them in an orange theme. I love pixel art. I love it a lot, and I don't do it nearly as often as I should. I don't know why, but I don't. I did this one in E.V.A Paint because E.V.A Paint has a good pixel brush that I found on their version of the assets store. That stays pixelated even at bigger sizes. Clip Studio Paint also has pixel brushes, but you have to draw at a really small size for that to work, which is fine. That's usually how pixel art is made, but I like drawing in bigger sizes, so having that as an option is really nice. So that's why the speed paint looks different, because I drew it in E.V.A Paint. Went with more cell shady style because of the style I was going with. But yeah, I really like how this turned out. I really need to do more pixel art. The next one was plum painting. This one was really interesting. I haven't really done this style before of like very, very painty, like extremely like basically doing the exact same process I would if I was doing this as like an oil painting sort of thing. I chose like the brushes that like I felt like resembled the closest to real paint brushes, and I did a lot of blending and mixing. I did like a darker tone for his skin first before doing the shadow for the purple shadows that I usually do. That made no sense, but yeah, it was a lot more complex. Not more complex, it was actually kind of easier in a lot of ways, but it was very different from how I normally do things. Even with how I do like my overpainting these days, it was still pretty different from what I normally do, but I do like it. It was very nice and textured. The one after that was a banana version of him, bananas, in a lineless style. I've done lineless before in the past. Usually lineless takes so long for me to do. I think it's because I'm having to basically do the line art and the colors at the same time. And that's actually a lot more tedious than one would think, especially for someone like me who really relies on line art to get the colors in and make them all clean. And when you don't have that, then you have to make sure the colors are clean on their own and they're a good substitute for the line art. And then the shading also takes quite a bit longer because you have to use the shadows as sort of a substitute for the lines to create the form you want. So yeah, this one took a while, as do all my lineless artworks. And it reminded me why I don't typically do lineless art. Next up is Blueberry, him in a blueberry style, in a watercolor style. I have this brush in Clip Studio. It's, I believe, called the Wet Blotch brush. It's actually a default brush, so it's not even one I had to download. And it's really nice. I really like this brush. I've used it before in the past for some portrait artworks. And what I typically like to do is just stick to making a clean sketch and then doing all of the colors and all of the shading with just that brush in a very watercolory style. It looks nice. I like how it typically ends up looking. It can be a bit tedious. But I don't mind it because it's nice, and it doesn't actually take that long. And for his next design, I drew him in a lemon lime design in my scratch art style. What do you know? I was just talking about that earlier. Now you can see what I was talking about. Yeah, for this, I wanted to make sure I had some black around him. So I gave him a silhouette of black around him so you could see the scratch art clearly. And yeah, this one obviously ended up being very simple because I basically just had to end up doing the line art. So this was kind of the exact opposite of the linelit style that I did before. And yeah, very scratchy, made sure it looked very scratchy. And I gave it a gradient, I gave the line art a gradient of green and yellow because of that fruit themed from before. And I gave it a little bit of a glow too because that always looks nice. The next one, I gave him a grape theme, also kind of a Greek theme as well because of grapes, and made a horror style art here. I've done horror before in my artworks. I haven't done it too much, so this was a good back to form for me because I haven't done a lot of horror artworks, especially in a while before this one. But yeah, I use this very, very like inky brush to do the line art with, and I try to make all the colors super desaturated and keep the rendering super desaturated as well. And for this one, I also gave him spots of bright red because it's grapes, and grapes also come in red. And yeah, I think this ended up looking really, really good. So good, in fact, I actually end up making this an artwork on of itself. You'll see what I mean in just a moment. The next one, I gave him a melon design and drew him in this sort of like highlighter sketch thing. I originally was wanting this to be something else, but that didn't end up happening, so I did this instead. This is a style that I'll do in my sketchbook sometimes, where I'll do the sketch and all the coloring with highlighter marker, and then do the line art with a nice brush pen. Usually ends up looking pretty nice, so I thought I'd try to replicate that in digital here, and I do think it looks good, although part of me kind of thinks I might have should have done this in traditional art in the way that I was just talking about, but then I would have had to recorded that, and I just talked about how that's not my favorite thing to do. The final one was a dragon fruit theme and my main style. At the time of recording this, like I said, I've changed a bit, so it's not even relevant. It's not even current anymore. These were made a bit ago, so yeah. But I wanted to share them with you, so that they weren't for nothing, because these took a while. Yeah, I like his design here. I like most of his designs that I've made. I haven't talked about any of his designs, but I tried to make them as fruit themed as possible, but also distinct from one another, so they don't look too similar. And I think this one ends up being one of my favorites. I like the spiky hair and just the spikes all around. I'm trying to make it a very spiky design, and I added in a little bit of green and white because of how dragon fruits are in real life. And that was all for the styles that I did. Now for the final artwork, which is a standalone artwork, but also a follow-up to this project. Drawing Lai in a horror context. That's right, I drew his great horror design again in a full illustration because I really liked it, so I thought I'd do it again. I once again used an inky brush for the line art, for the character and the background, but I saturated the colors more. So this one actually ended up being more of a combination of my main style and my more horror artwork because of the more saturated colors. And I shaded with purple and added a bit more red towards the end. The background curtains I kept red, and I only used a few layers to render the background to keep it simple and also not the center of attention. I learned recently that adding more texture gives something more of a focus in the overall piece. I think this was something that I knew like subconsciously, but I didn't like fully register. So yeah, keeping the background, like giving it a little bit of texture, giving it a little bit of shading just to make it give it depth, but not too much to give the focal point away to that instead of the main character, who gets way more shading and way more texture than the background. And I think that's cool. The background is also way more intricate. It's way more detailed as well. So making it shading it more simple helped as well. And yeah, drawing this took a while. I remember, I think I took a break from it for a bit and came back to finish it. But yeah, I really like how this ended up looking. I gave him towards the end, I used this cool like shape tool that almost has like a bit of a laciness to it for like a halo effect, and I added even more dark contrast towards the end to give it even more of a horror feel. And that was all the artworks that I made of Lai's old design. Let's say goodbye to Lai's old design, even though I didn't even draw his main design once in this. So yeah, but that's okay because we're going to be talking about his newest design in the next video, which, like I said, is going to be out in the next couple weeks. It's going to be out, that'll be out the Sunday after next. Because of my new uploading schedule. And please let me know what you'd like to see, if you'd like me to post anything on these Sundays between those, or if you're cool with just waiting. So yeah, thank you again so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you have, you can do all the things that YouTube requires you to do for some reason to make sure I don't die on the algorithm. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.